Hello, everybody. Drasco here from 10knorm.com, where my main focus is to help guide heart-centered entrepreneurs under 10K months to transcend all of the blind spots that keep them from thinking, feeling, acting, and authentically marketing so they can normalize their own versions of 10K months. And in today's episode, we have another Real Talk segment where I bring in a heart-centered entrepreneur who's on their way to their own 10K norm. And we have some real talk about what's currently their biggest challenge towards their 10K norm. And in that, we're going to explore who they are, why they do what they do. And then live on the call, I get to help them get out of their own way and overcome a challenge that they're currently facing towards their own 10K norm. And on today's call, we have Emily. Okay, we just went through this. Emily Thiroux Threatt. Is that somewhat
That's
accurate?
right.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. My apologies. I know I always butcher names. But Emily came to me as a guest, as somebody who just wrote a book all about living your way through grief, which is a comprehensive guide to reclaiming, cultivating joy, and carrying on in the face of loss. And just from the little bit that I know of her, and we're sure we're going to get into this, she's somebody who has a very intimate knowledge as far as loss and grief, and more importantly how to move through it. So sure, that's something that we're going to dive into. And in that, her mission now is to comfort and support all of those that are dealing with grief and loss, and transcend to focus on positivity. So Emily, thank you, and welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just great. It's a lovely day here in Maui.
I'm sure it is, and yeah, definitely. The Hawaii vibes are very real and happening right now, so I appreciate that. So, what I'd love to know from you is, I shared this little blurb with regards to, the work that you do with grief, and you have a book. Like, I'd love to know what your um, intro, or like how you generally talk about what you do is with other people.
Okay, I'll tell you a little about where the book came from. My husband Jacques, I was married to for 22 years, and the last 2 years of his life were kind of rough, and I was basically his caretaker. And he died in 2006. And we had a lovely, wonderful relationship. And I never dreamed that I would get married again. I didn't feel unmarried when he died. But I met Ron, and it took a while for us to decide to get married. He kept asking me, but I just wasn't feeling like I wasn't already married. And finally, I decided it was worth it. I had to go on with my life and live my life the best that I could. So we got married and we had a great life together. And he too became ill. And ironically, both of my husbands had the same thing, congestive heart failure that led to renal failure. And they both were sick for 2 years before they died. And besides that, they had nothing in common. But I learned a lot from caring for Jacques, what was good for caring for Ron. And Ron and I live very much in the moment. And we did come to Hawaii for his last 2 years because he had lived here before and loved it and still had friends here. And it was before I knew him. So he introduced me to Maui on our honeymoon. And we ended up realizing that this is where he really wanted to be for those last couple of years. So after he died, I was really pretty lost. And I'm a writer. I have a master's degree with a concentration in writing, and I've written 3 college textbooks on how to write, and taught writing at the university level for 30 years. So it was logical for me to deal with my grief through writing about it. And I wasn't writing for anybody else. I was just writing in my journals and notebooks and that sort of thing. And I found the more that I wrote, the better I felt, and found different kinds of things that I wrote helped me more than others. And I thought, I've got something here that I could share with other people to help them deal with their grief. So since I was relatively new to the island, and I basically not been out much the first 2 years that I was here because I was with Ron taking care of him, I decided I would just put a little notice on Meetup saying that I was holding a Writing Through Grief gathering at my house, and people showed up and they were great. And we just had a really good time together. I had started out to do that once a month, and they decided that they wanted more. So we switched to twice a month, and they'd come and we'd drink iced tea, and everybody would bring little goodies to eat, which it was just something that happened organically. I didn't suggest that, but everybody wanted to share with each other, and it was a great experience. And then the pandemic hit, and they couldn't come over anymore. So I put the group online, but most of the people in that group weren't real computer people. And so I've stayed in touch with them, but we're looking forward to getting to actually meet with that group again. But I have a whole new group online now. I have 3 different things online. One's Writing Through Grief. One of them is Reclaiming Your Joy After Loss. And the other one is named simply what my book is named, Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. And anyone who's dealing with any kind of grief is welcome to join those groups, because grief isn't just when a loved one dies. It also is the kind of thing that's been happening during the pandemic of losing homes, losing jobs, losing camaraderie with your friends. All that sort of thing is also loss, and we can deal with all of that. Well, then a few months after Ron died, a very good friend of his, we'd been family friends on the mainland, his friend just dropped dead. And he was much younger, and I just knew his wife wasn't going to have any idea what to do or think about or anything at this point. So I wrote her a letter saying, these are the things you need to be concerned about right now, and these are the things that you don't need to be concerned about right now. And speaking from experience for her. And she let me know how incredibly valuable that guidance was to her, that nobody else talked to her about any of the things that I talked to her about in that letter. So I thought, I got to do more than this. So I decided I was going to keep in touch with her every week for a whole year. And I decided to do it a little differently. I'd done things like that before with friends where I sent them an email or a text or something every week. But I thought I'm going to send her a card, because everybody loves to get things in the mail. So I made cards out of using pictures that I've taken around Maui, so that each one's different. And on the inside, I thought, okay, I've got the cards, but what am I going to say? So as I worked on that, it only took me about a day and a half to come up with 52 different things to say during the different times of that first year. So not long after that, I was listening to a podcast while I was making another set of cards for somebody else. And at the bottom of I really liked the podcast, really related to the person who was talking, who lives in Toronto. And at the bottom of her webpage, it says, I'm also a book agent. So if you have an idea for a book, let me know. And I thought, you know what? I have an outline for a book with 52 chapters. So I contacted her, and she became my agent right away. And it took me about a year and a half to get the book written, actually not quite that long. And then we got an agent, and it was published this January. And when I got my contract, they asked me how many words were in the book. And I told them how many words were in the book, and they knew what it was about. And my agent had been negotiating with them all along. And after I signed the contract with the number of words that I'd written, they sent it to my editor who works with me. And my editor contacted me, and she goes, I don't know what happened, but this is way too long. We can't publish something this long. She said, would you like our editors to cut it for you? And I said, no. I didn't want to lose half of my book. So I thought about it for a while, and I got back to him and I said, we have a contract for this number of words. How about if we divide the book in two? That's the first 26 chapters would be kind of early grief, and the second 26 chapters would be like the the next things that would be coming in grief. And so they agreed to that. So the first book has 26 chapters and came out in January. And I talk about a lot of different things in the book in those 26 chapters. And at the end of each chapter, I have a practice for people to use to help them deal with their grief. I firmly believe that you can grieve and be happy at the same time. And a lot of people don't realize that that's possible. So that's kind of my mission, is to get out that that's possible, and I can help them with ways to do it and help them to realize that they probably already are happy in a lot of ways. So that's where I am with this. And I really enjoyed the process, and I love working with people who've read the book or reading the book or are in any of my groups or write for me. I've got a writing class on every Saturday. It's at 11 a.m. Hawaii time. I don't know what that would correspond to anybody else's time, but we meet just for an hour, and each week we write on something different. And it's everybody writes for a certain amount of time, and then we all talk about what we wrote. And it's a wonderful group. There are different people in it all the time. It's not a big group. We keep it small so that we can really be able to communicate with each other. And that's a really wonderful experience if you're looking for something else to do to help you with your grief. And we smile and get happy in that group a lot. So that's my story.
I love it. That's such a super cool story that I think just completely mirrors exactly what you ended off with, which is, you had these big cases of loss that ultimately led you to this process right now, this book, these groups that bring joy into your life. And it mirrors so many of the business and entrepreneur stories that I've shared on this podcast and other people have as well, in addition to, I think, the more micro stories that we experience even personally. And I want to definitely get your take on this, because one of the things that I often share with my clients and the people that I'm working with is, when it comes to releasing all of the blind spots that kind of keep us back, there's usually this almost, it feels like a death or a letting go and a disattachment of one aspect of ourselves that we no longer identify with, so that we can step into who we truly are. So as far as like 10K norm, that oftentimes happens with heart-centered entrepreneurs, where they begin to realize their authenticity. There's something about their current self that is blocking them from really truly expressing authentically what it is that they want to say. Until we get rid of that, most of the marketing that we do is going to be diluted, or it's going to be misguided. And the reason I think that is so hard for people to do, especially on their own, or even, when facilitated, is because there's this element of almost like dying, letting that part die off. And then the subsequent sadness that comes from it. Sometimes it's, I've wasted so much time. I wish I would have done this earlier. And then eventually we make room for it. So I'm just curious, from your vantage point, because you're such a deep expert in this field, how does that land for you? Is that something you've also seen in your life or the people that you work with? I'm just curious to get your take on it.
I think you're right. We go through so many different things in our lives, and I've been around long enough to have several different careers, obviously different husbands, and each one, when you go from one to the next, your life changes. My careers are very varied. I started out as a nurse, and I went from that to teaching English, or not English, writing in the university. And I went from that to owning a theater and school of arts and cafe and art gallery, all in the same beautiful big building. And that was a wonderful experience. But I couldn't be that and a writing teacher and a nurse at the same time, yet each one of them informed the next thing I did. And after Ron died, I went back to teaching again. The university invited me to come back, and I teach entirely online. So up until the enrollment this last semester dropped drastically, I've been teaching every semester, even after I retired, because I really love teaching writing, especially online. So each one of those things is kind of compartmentalized in a different place. And as you really devote yourself to whatever it is that you're doing in this moment, then the other things do kind of fade away. And sometimes it feels like a real loss. Like I miss my theater and all that went along with that. And I miss my nursing career. I find myself watching silly shows on TV that are about hospitals because it reminds me of how much I used to enjoy when I was doing nursing. And I also own an ambulance company that my dad traded our house for when I was 14. And at that time, you only had to be 14 and have an advanced first aid card to go on ambulance calls. So, and it was a small ambulance company in a small town. And so Mom and Dad and I ran that company, and I started really learning about how to run a business and not go broke really fast, and what kind of dedication and everything that that included, and a great part of my education as far as business goes. And it's still in the ambulance company. They just celebrated their 60th anniversary this year, which is pretty amazing for a small business. So I'm grateful to have that. It's kind of something that I always do. I've never let go of it. But the other things, I can look on them, reflect on them, and now see the joy that came from them. I don't focus on the sad things that came from them, because everything you do, there are highs and lows. And when you focus on the good part, it makes it easier to move forward into the next thing you're going to do. And when you were talking, one of the things that I was thinking about is that not only do we grieve the loss of something forward, but something when you move forward, something that people don't often realize is that there are only two real emotions in life, and that's love and fear. And if you do what you do based on love, it's likely to be positive, and it's likely to have better results. Where if you base things on fear, which is a lot of us are afraid we're not going to get that 10K this month, afraid that we can't succeed, afraid that nobody's going to find us or nobody's going to listen to us. And that fear makes it so that you can't succeed, you can't move forward. You really have to let go of the fear to be able to do what it is you really want to do in life. And in doing this grief work, I can honestly say I never felt any fear with it at all. It kind of just evolved naturally and felt good all along the process. I really liked it. But I also can say I'm not making a whole lot of money at it yet. You get royalties 4 times a year, and my book just came out in January, so I haven't had a chance to make a lot of money from it yet. But I see the potential for it. And for me, I'm not looking at it so much as I want the income, but I know that the more I make, the more it will reflect success in getting to people to provide them comfort and support in what I have to offer. Because that's really my big intention, is to provide comfort, support, love, and joy to all the people that I work with. And that's a little bit different than a lot of businesses, but I can say when you base it that way, that you feel really good about what you're doing. It makes it easier for you to do, it makes it easier to spend the hours and whatever it costs financially to do what you're doing. And I really love what I'm doing, and I really am happier than I've ever been.
That's amazing. And I mean, even just listening to you, I can feel the love, and like I feel better, even though, ironically, we're talking about grief, which I think is exemplary of exactly what it is that you're talking about. So there's just one more thing I would like to kind of get your reflection back on before we dive into the aspects you just mentioned on, like, how do I make money from it, or, what's the path forward? With regards to your distinction between like love and fear, like ultimately all the other emotions are kind of like kind of stem or branch off from those two. And I agree with you, right? I don't know if it's a famous Oprah quote, but for some reason that's who I'm picturing saying it. Um, and the reason that I wanted to get back to that point is in my own experience, with grief, and more importantly, with just, so for context, for listeners that you don't know, and obviously yourself, a big part of why my first business imploded was because I was so emotionally constipated and I had a lot of emotional blind spots, that I just kind of tried solving with my head. And when I finally let that go, and there was, instances in my life from a breakup to then the business started to implode, that just kind of made me face those things. A lot of that kind of self-imposed grief is something that I went through, and the process that helped me was actually just learning how to feel. And it's one of the first tenets of the 10K norm program, which is, if we're going to navigate this world of learning how to market and putting ourselves out there, etc., things are going to come up that are going to brush us the wrong way. And if we don't know how to manage them, then the tactics don't really matter. So that piece with regards to managing the emotions and how that to me relates to grief and how I experienced it was from that love space. You can simply allow the emotion to be. It's not a matter of adding the additional layers of this shouldn't be here, I shouldn't feel this way, I shouldn't feel happy, I'm guilty, like if, or I feel guilty if I am happy during this. Tears come up at random times, I should hold them back. It was more just a process of really allowing and deeply trusting that like emotions, while painful, like they can't really do anything to you. Like you're not going to die if you feel sad. It might be intense, it might be a lot, but it's never really too much. In fact, it oftentimes becomes freeing after that experience. And I think this can be induced if we allow it to happen with regards to the things that life reflects back to us. And it is a very healthy process to do because it allows us to move more forward, because we release a lot of the stuff that doesn't need holding on to anymore. So I'm just curious, in your own experience, in your own work with individuals, is that something that people oftentimes have a hard time with, or what's your experience like with that?
Absolutely. I believe in being heart-centered in everything I do. When you're doing your business and anything else in your life and you're coming from your heart, it's hard to go wrong. But I can give you a couple of examples of one person who, with my theater, was just doing everything that she could to destroy it. And she was doing that for personal gain because she wanted to, she looked at me and saw me as somebody who was rich if I could afford to have a theater. And so she could get money from me. And she did that by making a false claim to workers' compensation. And it was a big deal. It went very far. And finally, when it got down to workers' comp making the decision whether to pay her or not, I had the opportunity to talk to one of the parents and of the kids that were taking classes at the theater. And he said, you seem kind of like something's up. He said, what's going on? And I told him what it was. And it turned out that he was the attorney for the county where I lived that worked with workers' comp fraud cases. And I didn't know that talking to him. He asked me and I answered him. And so he looked into it and discovered that this was a pattern that this person had, that she would go from community to community and find somebody that she could make these claims about. And a lot of times she got money from it, but she left as soon as she did. And so they started investigating it. And when she realized she was being investigated, she disappeared and the claim went away because they couldn't find, either for her or against her if she wasn't there. So I think when you're doing the right things from the right way, different things will come to you that you can't anticipate, that you have no idea that that's going to happen. But because you're doing things from a position of love, from a position of service to the community. I loved the classes for kids because we were, the success stories were amazing. And we had a nonprofit foundation that went along with it that was earning money to get grants. And we got grants like to provide classes for foster kids who wouldn't be able to get something like that at all, so that they could, if they wanted to take acting classes, they could, or singing classes, they could come and take them for free. And their growth was amazing, and they got nurtured there in a way that they weren't getting anyplace else in their lives. So when you're doing the right thing for the right reasons and you're in full integrity, that makes it doesn't necessarily guarantee success, but it makes it really much more pleasant in the process. So I probably got a little off topic there, but I hope that gives you an idea for what I think about that.
Listen, I'm always good with tangents, especially this one, because it's so rooted in what I think is your core message, which is this: even in the darkness, focusing on the love brings something good. Like even in the loss, even in the grief, even in those emotions, if you stay rooted in love, good things eventually like sprout and birth from that. Even though, yeah, I agree, it wasn't a direct answer. I think it was a much better answer because it goes to the heart of what it is that you do. And it reminds me of the score, like highest energy wins, right? Like what we input into the thing is what comes out on the other end, right? So yeah, I think that's super important. And stemming from that, because we kind of mentioned this, okay, so like, what do I do now? I have this gift, I know where does it want to go, I'm creating the container for it. What do you feel like is your challenge now as you move to make, because you've had other successful businesses before, so as you make this business into your own 10K norm?
Well, there's a couple things, and I just thought of one when you were just saying that. Is one of them is that I'm a giver, and so I don't put as much emphasis on receiving. So like the class that I was telling you about, the writing class that I do on Zoom on Saturdays, it's for free just because I really enjoy it. It's really fun. And I've got to learn that it's okay to monetize things, because if there's no perceived value, people don't take it as seriously. For instance, when I was a nurse, I worked mostly in OB, and I also was teaching childbirth education classes. And they were required at that time for fathers to be able to be in the delivery room. So we had pretty good attendance, and people actually came. But when I would teach someplace, I was asked by a community college to do it for free for people that probably wouldn't be able to afford to get the classes anyplace else. And I said, that sounds great to me. I'd be happy to do that. They might come to the second class or the first class, and I wouldn't see them again because it didn't have a value to them, because they weren't financially invested in it. I was hoping they'd be invested in it from their heart. Like, what a great opportunity to be in the delivery room. Now you don't have to go through classes. Well, actually, this last year, a lot of people didn't get to be in the delivery room when their babies were born because of the COVID regulations. But hopefully that's going to be coming back soon. But I really, through that example, saw that if people weren't paying for what they were getting, they didn't value it as much. And I haven't really been able to figure out how to do that with what I'm doing. I do get royalties from the book, but anybody who's written a book knows that unless you're a #1 bestseller, that's not a whole lot of money. It's nice, and I have a tendency to donate it to worthy causes. Like a children's grief center here on the island. I love to promote that and support that. But I also realize that if I can do things that have a financial cost, it will equate with a financial value so that I can get what I want to get to more people, to offer more comfort and support, which is my ultimate intention. So I've been working on creating a group like that meets every week for online for 6 months, and has a lesson, but it also has um, communication between other people that are going through the same things, but they would get the value out of the lessons that they're getting in the group, and also get the value out of the relationships they wouldn't have had any other way. So I think that's one way I can see monetizing this more. I also am working on, I've written a TED Talk. I've been working with a coach on a TED Talk, and am working on finding a place that will accept me to give my TED Talk. And I think that that will also help, because there's, like, who knows who Emily Thiroux Threatt is? You know, I'm not Elizabeth Kubler-Ross or somebody that's out there in the grief world, or was out there in the grief world, so that my name would be recognized. Hopefully it will be soon, but it isn't yet. So that's part of the process that I need to go through, is to have people know me. And I do that a lot by social media. I'm very active on social media, and that's mostly to get that recognition, so that people will see that I have a gift to give them that they may not have even known they needed.
Got it. So, 1 second. So in that case, from what you're saying, it sounds to me like intellectually you have a very good idea of what's missing. Like, I can see there's this monetization piece. I got to be active here, and then there's some opportunity there. It's, if I was just looking at what you understand and can see about your situation, I'm like, that's pretty clear, right? Like, it seems like you know where to go. So given that, what do you think is standing in the way of executing or making that happen?
The main thing is the exposure, I think, because I can provide a wonderful product with the group that I'm working on. I'm very excited about what I'm putting into it. I think the book is great. It's gotten on Amazon, all the reviews have been 5-star, and they're really cool reviews. And I think that's kind of amazing. It shows that it's reaching people, and a variety of people on Amazon review it. It's not like my friends got together and did it. You know, it's people I don't have any idea who they are giving me 5-star reviews. So my name is beginning to get out there, but I have to get it out there in a way that people are going to go, I got to take that class. I know who she is. For instance, after Jacques died, Marcy Shimoff came out with a book called Happy for No Reason. And I said, I've got to read that book, because I need that right now, because happiness is not what's happening with me. And I got so much comfort and support from that book that she's been kind of an inspiration to me ever since. And recently I discovered a course that I could take from her to become certified in happiness education. And I thought, what a perfect combination with this. So I'm hoping to become certified in July on that and focus on that. But the reason I'm telling you this is because I need a name like Marcy Shimoff, that if you say her name, people recognize who she is. Or Jack Canfield, who has the whole Chicken Soup for the Soul series. You mention his name and people immediately think of something really good and incredible success. So I'm not sure exactly what it is besides my work I'm doing in social media that I can do to reach the people who could really benefit of what I have to offer.
So is the only way that you can be successful if you reach the size of both of those offers?
I think I'm successful now, because everything that I'm doing with it is helping people. So it's not really a thing of success. It's a goal of reaching more people, and I see this it coming from people recognizing the value of what I do, and that's kind of where the money comes in, I think. Does that make sense?
So I'm going to have some clarifying questions there. So
Okay.
people recognizing the value of what I do. You mentioned previously, like, the more I put out, like, people will see that I have a gift that can help them. So would you say those sentiments are true?
Yes.
Okay. And with those sentiments, if people didn't recognize that you have value, then how would you complete that statement?
If they didn't see a value in it, they wouldn't buy the book, they wouldn't take a class, they wouldn't care who I am if they didn't see a value associated with it.
Okay. So then no money would be exchanged in that
That's
instance.
right.
Wow.
No money would be exchanged. It's like if you want to buy a new car, you're going to buy the car that has the most value to me. Like I recently bought a Chevy Bolt, because it's 100% electric, and I see the value of having an electric car. And I wouldn't buy a car that has terrible gas mileage because I don't see the value of that. I don't know if that makes sense in the context of what you're saying. But
So my follow-up question would be, right now, a lot of people see the value in what you do. Like maybe the exposure isn't at the level of a Jack Canfield. That's fine. But as you've seen with the reviews, the feedback, how many people keep showing up, there is value in what you do, as shown by the, volunteering of the time and energy to be with you. There's just no money exchange.
mhm.
Okay. So then is it really true that people have to recognize what I do for there to be value?
No, because they get value out of what I do, whether they spend money or not. I'm equating the people taking classes like Jack Canfield does classes for a big amount of money, and people are happy to pay it because he's Jack Canfield. And I'm thinking that I don't want to charge a big amount of money for my classes, but I want to charge enough so that people will say, I got to have this because I know it's going to make a big difference in my life. Where if something's free, then they're going to go, oh, well, I don't have time to read that today or go to it today. And then they miss out and you lose track of them.
Right. So then there's just one sentiment of, if it's free, then they won't care. If I charge too much, then it'll be inaccessible. And then there's some magic number in between that will make it accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Okay. So it's kind of like, well, okay. So to me, they kind of sound a little conflicting. Does it feel that way with you or no?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So is there, like, if I had the perfect price, would all of my problems go away?
No, because I would still have to be doing something to get the people to know who I am and what my not so much for me personally, but what the value is of what I have to offer.
Right. And a lot of people know you right now. Again, not Jack Canfield numbers, but a good amount of people
Mm-hmm.
right now, enough that should you decide to charge something, it would be logical to assume that a small percentage of them would actually pay. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so.
Okay. So then going back to the question, if I had the perfect price, people already know my value, would all of my problems go away? Does that feel true for you or not?
Not really, because there has to be more people than the base that I have now
And
for to meet my intention of providing comfort and support to as many people as I possibly can.
okay, so right now you're providing a lot of comfort and support for the people in your circle because
Mm-hmm.
most of your stuff is free. Is it really true that if I charge for something, then that would go against the comfort and support?
I don't think it would go against the comfort and support. For instance, most of the people that I work with, I don't use my book like as a textbook for anything that I do, but most of the people that I work with have purchased my book on their own and have recommended it to other people, and they give it as a gift to somebody instead of flowers for a funeral, to have something that's going to actively help them instead of just be pretty until they wilt in a couple of days.
Yeah, like it's a much more thoughtful gift for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that goes right along with, providing support and comfort for like passing that on, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
that is still achieved. So then when it comes back to the charging of it, because one thing you said at the beginning was, I have an issue, or I'm not as, I would prefer to give rather than to receive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And now the question is really like you're giving, right? That there's no question about the value. People love what you have. There's 5-star reviews, a solid amount of people in your circles. Yet the receiving part is where we have an issue, i.e., if I charge, then all of these problems start to occur. So before I continue, does that resonate or not?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
So which parts do, which parts don't?
well, I don't want, oh, I need to speak positively here instead of telling you what I don't want. I want people to come to the group or whatever it is that I do with that, or hire me to speak. I want them to do that based on what they can get out of it. They see the value of what they get out of it. And now I'm getting a little lost in what I was going to say. Can you say the question again? That might refresh what I was trying to say.
So my question was surrounding the receiving.
The receiving. Right? Mm-hmm.
It's like there's just one sentiment where I've already identified like I am a giver and I love to give. And from everything that you've told me, it's like the giving is not an issue. People are finding value across the board, whether it's through your workshops, whether it's through the book, whether it's through the gift giving, whether it's through your social media. That I think nobody questions. Again, it might not be at the level of a Jack Canfield, and doesn't mean it won't be there in the future. But I don't think there's an issue with the giving or even the infrastructure and the pieces at play on the giving. But it's now suddenly, even within all of the value you've provided to people across the years and etc., when it comes to the receiving, this is where we get jumbled up. Okay, so that was kind of which part of it resonates or doesn't resonate with you.
Yeah, I do think we get kind of jumbled up in the receiving. I don't see anything wrong with the receiving. I welcome the receiving. I think I just need to figure out how to do it in a way that will encourage people to take advantage of what I have to offer instead of not do it because they say I can't afford to. Does that make sense?
So clarify it a little bit. I think I know what you mean, but I'd rather clarify it.
Yeah, I wouldn't, especially when people have somebody very close to them that they are financially intertwined. It doesn't have to be a marriage, but however people are financially intertwined. When one of them dies, they tend to have great fear about money and how they're going to survive without the cooperation they had between them before the person died. And because of that, they're going to be not likely to reach out and pay for something that would really help them be able to get past that. Because they're going to feel that they don't have extra income to spare on something that isn't food, clothing, and shelter.
And do you know that that's absolutely true?
No, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I don't. It's real easy for us to make things up in our head. of how things will or won't work. And I think that that's one of the things that's holding me back, is that because I want to reach everybody who wants it, I don't want to put anything in the way to prevent them from getting that.
So it's almost as there's this element of, am I taking advantage of people in grief? Would that be accurate or no?
Yeah, yeah. I don't want people to think, like, I've had, when my book came out, I did a launch thing, and I was mentioning it kind of frequently over the couple of weeks of the book launch. And I had people write me in my social media and say, well, you might have a good thing, but you're just pushing it for financial gain. And I thought, no, I'm not. You're not reading what I'm saying. You're not seeing it. But it wasn't just one person. You know, a few people said, and I wasn't doing, I know that everything that I was doing was honest, loving, uh, attractive. And it wasn't, you know, the book cost less than $20. So it's not like I was going to make millions of dollars by spending all this time putting things on social media. But there's the perception of people that do that, but it's not everybody, and it's not everybody that's going to say something about it on social media.
Absolutely, right. I mean, let's just say in simpler terms, you just had a bunch of haters come in with regards to what you were doing. And I say that lightly because if they are in grief, you know, I don't want to make it seem like I'm making fun of them.
Yes.
I'm saying it in the sense that people who have a bright light to shine, which definitely includes you, that shining, okay, will sometimes reflect too intensely on others. And if they're in that part of their journey where they don't know how to deal with that, they're not ready to deal with that, whatever, it will come back in defense as you're just doing this for profit, i.e., I'm discounting you because I don't want to look at what you are reflecting back to me. Now, a lot of us understand that intellectually. And the quote that I like here, because I use Byron Katie's work a lot. I don't know if you're familiar
I
with.
love Byron Katie. Yeah, she's
Perfect.
great.
So, and that's kind of what I'm gearing towards.
I was recognizing your questions. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. So yeah, you know, then you know where this is going to lead, and it's even better for that reason. But one of the things that I love using from Byron Katie is we have three types of business, right? Our own, yours, and God's. Assuming somebody is not in a position to pay to work through their grief at the time of the loss is whose business?
That's theirs.
Correct. That is their business. But assuming they don't is whose business?
Me.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
our own projection in that moment. And it would make sense that if that is how I view the world, that is what I'm attached to, then everything other than giving will be a big faux pas, right? Because the rest of the world knows
Yeah.
that they can't do this. So how does that land for you?
Yeah. You're uncovering things for me that are there. And as you're talking, another thing that has been a big concern for me is that people will do anything to avoid talking about death and grief. They may be the people that need it the most, but I don't know how to break through to them that it's okay to get help. It's okay to reach out. It's okay to get comfort. And instead I get brick walls. I'll tell them what I do and they go, that's nice, but how about those Dodgers? You know, because they're not going to talk about it.
So again, same question. Whose business are you in?
Yeah. Okay. That's their issue. All I can do is provide the very best I can,
Right.
and make it available.
Correct, because that is your business, right? I am going to continue being the light that's going to attract the people who are ready to have these conversations. And even taking that a step further, right? Your statement was like people will avoid talking about death and grief. If you turn that around, what does it become?
People avoid talking about death and grief. I'm not really sure which direction to go with that. It's like, are they?
So if you
People
replace
don't.
people with I,
Yeah, yeah. I could say I don't want to talk to people about death and grief, but I do. I really do. So the I doesn't really fit in that statement, I think.
well, your statement was, I, the one I have written down is people will avoid
Hmm.
talking about death and grief. You just said something a bit different, which is people don't want to.
Yeah.
I know you
Okay.
want to talk about death and grief.
Hmm.
So if you flipped around your original statement, people will avoid talking about death and grief. If you flip that around, how does it land?
If I flip that, it's I avoid talking about death and grief, but I don't.
Do you avoid talking about it from the vantage point of I can help you solve it or move through it?
I I consider each situation individually because people deal with it or handle it so differently. And if I start talking to them and they're responsive, then I'll talk to them all they want. And if they're not responsive, I'll tell them, when you're ready, I have this book, I have these classes, but I won't talk to you about it now because you're not in a place to receive it yet. But when you're ready, I'm here.
Okay. So that's a bit different than
Hmm.
the previous bit where you're like, well, I'm in their business and I'm not letting them evolve. I'm not focusing on me.
Hmm.
So where
Yes.
does that balance lie in that case?
You know, one thing that I've really worked on was giving up judgment. And I'm realizing right now that I'm judging the people that are not wanting to deal with death and grief. And I just need to let that go because they're on their path. They're doing whatever they need to do for themselves at the time. All I can be is the light, the beacon, the hope. And when they're ready, if they want to, they'll take advantage of that. Does that make sense?
100%. And it even makes sense going even further, right? If I judge the people who I know I can help, but that are refusing my help, it's a lot easier to stay in their business because as healers, as coaches, as heart-centered people that want to help, we often get entangled in the part of that drama triangle, which is the savior. And ironically, I just
Mm-hmm.
had another recording about this very thing where sometimes it's like, if I can save them, then I know I'm worthy. Or if I can save them, then I'm
Oh,
valuable.
wow.
If I can save them, then I can save myself. So how does that piece land for you?
That's really interesting. Uh, as I really don't see myself as a savior. I really don't. People have to save themselves. And I can give them tools to help them deal with themselves, but it's up to them. I can't do it for them. I can't provide anything that will make it happen. They have to choose to take advantage of what would make it happen.
And I have no doubt that intellectually you understand that. What about your actions? Are they in full alignment with that?
I think they basically are, because if someone backs off and doesn't want to talk to me about what I do or what I offer, I'm not going to push it. I won't do that at all.
Beautiful.
Because yeah, I don't know what's in their heart. I may have said my piece about, this is what I can offer you, and if they don't want it, then that's okay. It's absolutely okay with me because they're on their path and I'm not on their path.
Absolutely. So yeah, I would agree with you that it's not a heavy like savior drama.
Mhm.
What I would question then is, are you doing the same thing when it comes to charging and pricing for your help?
Hmm.
Because somebody
Oh,
who does say,
yeah.
here, I'm willing to pay X amount for you to like dive deep and help me with this, is that not the same as the conversation being, hey, I'd really like to talk about death and grief?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm seeing that in a much different light now.
And what's coming out as you're looking at it from this light?
That I just have to um, not, all right, there I'm being negative again. I have to charge what is reasonable for anything that I do. And if people accept it, that's great. And if they don't, that's great too.
Agreed. And it sounds much more like, I don't know if you noticed the tonality, but it sounds much more firm than at the beginning. Because at the beginning, it was kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe should. There's this perfect thing. If I was only like Jack Canfield, then I could do it, etc. But now it's like, well, no, hold on. Like, I can let people decide what level of help they want from me through the exchange of a fair price. With
Mm-hmm.
that, like, how does that land with you right now?
That sounds perfect.
Perfect. So I would then take it one step further and get you again to look a little bit outside yourself, because that was very me focused. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
my transition and my move through that piece of the puzzle. But if we flip it, for somebody who is in grief, in a society, in a world that does not want to talk about it, doesn't think about it until they have to think about it. Now they're in the throes of it, and there's so many things going on. Like you said with your friend, nobody has written me or told me about these things, but they're so relevant, right? Somebody in that moment, you could argue that they are quote unquote vulnerable, but you're not somebody who is going to take advantage, right? You're actually
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's going to help. In that moment, it's almost like I invite you to ask yourself, what is it worth it for them to have somebody facilitate and collapse the time that they have to go through this suffering?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's wonderful. Perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Because from my vantage point, the reason why I didn't want to lead with that, even though that is like, we're
Mm-hmm.
getting into the marketing now, it's like, until you get clear on what is my resistance to that piece, where am I holding myself back from that perspective, it's almost an irrelevant perspective. But when I look at you talk right now, it's like, okay, you are more at peace with being like, yeah, you know what, that there is a value, and there is, it's almost like there is a value to the free aspects, the comfort, and those aspects. I think you knock out of the park very easily. But then there is a second level of somebody who is dedicated, who is showing they want to collapse that time, that you can provide your energy and then get the energetic exchange back of the transaction, so that for those people who do show you that they're ready, they're like, you can really impact their life way more than all of the other like ripples, right? Which is fine,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what those people are ready for. So it really just comes down to, when you're thinking, is this taken advantage of? It's like, flip that around and think, what if I had to knock on a door of every single person who is in grief right now, who is willing to pay, but I got in my own stuff and didn't actually offer it? How would I feel then?
Yeah. Wow. You're really good at this.
I've had some training and some experience, but yes, thank you. So how does all of that land for you?
Very well. Very well. It's a getting things in a real perspective, from a genuine place, a genuine perspective that works, that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that, because that is exactly where I would want it to come from. So given all of that, does that feel like it's complete, or is there anything more that feels like it wants to surface?
Oh yeah, it feels really good to me because I feel now that I can put a price on the different things that I want to do, and it's okay. And like I said earlier, if they want to take it, they will, and if they don't, it's not my problem, you know.
Absolutely. It is. And actually that part, I think you're totally bang on. Like, yeah, take it or leave it. That's fine. Like I can love you either way.
Hmm.
But I think it's for you that the piece was, I need to stand in that power and say, hey, if you want to go deeper, if you want to have somebody facilitate your way through it, if you don't want to do this alone, we can do it for this price. But
Hmm.
it's almost like it's a noble price. You know what I mean? It's not, I'm taking advantage of you. It's, like I said, collapsing the time and decreasing the intensity of this very, bad experience, right?
I love that, collapsing the time and decreasing the intensity. That's perfect. 'Cause that's exactly what I can do to help them.
100%. So good. I'm glad that that's landing, because I think your work is so important, because at times of loss, people don't really have a choice, right? Like, it's not like
Hmm.
I chose to go through this experience, so I'm going to tough it out. It's, you know threw a wrench in my life type of deal. That's when it's needed. So it's certainly needed work.
Yes, I believe that.
Love it. Well, just to confirm then, once again, does this feel complete for you?
It does. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
no problem at all. And then just to kind of close it off on that note, if there's anything else you wish to say to people with regards to grief, and subsequently where they can find you, the floor is absolutely yours.
Well, my book is Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief. It's available any place books are sold. It's traditionally published. I offer classes every Saturday on an hour-long class on writing through your grief. I've got lots of Facebook, uh, 3 different groups on Facebook, and I'm always on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm available to you. My website is lovingandlivingyourwaythroughgrief.com, and you can contact me through there for any further information, and there's a lot of information on there too. And I'd love for you to join my mailing list and get my weekly blog that I send out. Always good information, helpful information there, and that lets me get to you exciting things that come up that can be of great help to you.
Love it.
Thank you.
That's amazing. And definitely, for if you yourself are in grief, or have gone through that experience and it's not been 100% resolved, or somebody who is, we'll put all of the details in the show notes, and definitely go check out Emily. So that's that. Thank you very much for being on the show today, and we'll see everybody on the next one.